Welcome to In Today's World. I'm Isla, your host, and I'm very lucky to be with Nimi, our guest for today. In Today's World examines mindfulness in connection with contemporary issues in society. And today we'll be discussing social media and its relation to millennials and millennial usage of social media. All components, emotional, psychological, social components of social media usage and through the lens of mindfulness. And just would like to say a few words to introduce Nimi, our guest. She's a women's self-empowerment coach. She helps women to heal their past and discover their true powers and potential within. Her fun activities include dancing, paper crafts, and writing poetry. And Nimi, if you'd like to say a few words about me to introduce me.
Thank you. Thank you, Isla, for having me. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and also to know you as the person that you are. And I'd love to introduce you. Isla is a wonderful human being as I know her, and she's also a wellness coach, an artist, healer, and of course, a podcaster. She is the director of Inner Contour Mindfulness, providing arts-based mindful coaching for personal growth. Her fun activities include yoga, nature walks, and swimming. So lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. And thank you for those kind words, Nimi. I feel it the same way about you. I really hold you up in a very high light. Thank you. And as per tradition for this podcast, we each take turns saying a superpower that each one of us sees in the other person. So for Nimi, I see a cheerleader, like strong support and just unyielding kindness in terms of boosting people up when things aren't going well. She's the wind underneath a person's wings, especially during those times and in good times as well. She's there cheering you on. So I mean that in the best possible way. And that's what I see in you, Nimi.
That's amazing. And you are pretty accurate at that. I do love empowering other people, especially other women, but I'm blown away at the fact that you came up with that without, you know, without just off of your intuitive nature. And that is, by the way, incidentally, what I came up with was Isla's superpower is her ability to connect intuitively, but I believe that you intuitively connect with nature.
Mhm.
And then whatever you receive from nature, whether it's wisdom or whether it's secrets or whether it's messages, I believe that you impart that onto the world. And that's how I feel that the wellness part of the coaching comes about when someone comes to you or even just meets you in general. I feel that your intuitive nature is very strong. So that's how I see you as your superpower, being
Oh,
intuitive.
thank you so much, Nimi. I feel like I received a wonderful, good explosion of emotion from that good, positive emotion. I feel like in the meditation community, whenever that happens, we sound the bell. So I think I'll sound it just to have that energy circulate in the world from both of us recognizing each other's talents and abilities and superpowers. So I'll just sound it. Thank you so much for those kind words and thank you for being on this podcast. I taught myself to live simply, by Anna Akhmatova. I taught myself to live simply and wisely, to look at the sky and pray to God, and to wander long before evening, to tire my superfluous worries when the burdocks rustle in the ravine and the yellow-red rowanberry cluster droops. I compose happy verses about life's decay and beauty. I come back. The fluffy cat licks my palm, purrs so sweetly, and the fire flares bright on the sawmill turret by the lake. Only the cry of a stork landing on the roof occasionally breaks the silence. If you knock on my door, I may not even hear. I chose this poem to lead into our discussion about mindfulness and social media usage with millennials because it highlights a lot of our sensory experiences in life. It highlights our auditory experiences, our experience of vision, of looking out into the world and seeing life, and just our overall feeling of awe and wonder. And that's what really spoke to me in this poem. And I'm connecting it with the topic because I feel like in some ways, social media is an incredible asset in our culture for obvious reasons of connecting us and helping to bridge divides in some ways through giving people, those who have access, um, access to a very broad audience. And I think that it has advanced us in many ways, but in some ways, I feel like we're still struggling with, as a society, how to be more mindful and be more aware of how we use social media, what we post, how often we're on social media, and various other questions related to how we can increase our conscientiousness related to our social media usage. And I just like to step back a little bit to start and just define a few key terms, which, and Nimi, please feel free to chime in if I'm not saying, the comprehensive definition or overall framework of the discussion topics, but just so our listeners know, mindfulness is being present moment to moment. So that moment to moment awareness is what we're defining as mindfulness. Anytime that we're absorbed in our present moment experience, that's how we're defining mindfulness in relation to this podcast and this subject. And if you feel free to chime in, if you'd like.
I completely agree. That's
Okay.
what it is for me as well, is that
Okay.
every moment of your life is you are mindful of what you are doing, thinking, saying, hearing, seeing.
Right, right. And different people relate to it in different ways, and that's completely fine. But that's basically the most essential definition, what Nimi and I have been talking about. And social media, many people know, but we're mainly referring to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Have I missed anything? Anytime we're online forming social networks, that's pretty much what we're referring to when we talk about social media.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. Anytime, I think there are so many platforms now, but even if you're just part of maybe one or all of them, it doesn't matter which one. Anytime you're connecting with another human being online, you're interacting basically with the world. That I would consider social media.
Right, right. And millennials, it's a little bit of a fuzzy definition, but those who came of age during um, the switch of the millennium. So it would be now, it's 2022. So people in their, mostly in their 30s, and beginning 40s and maybe late 20s.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
Okay. So we've defined our terms here. And just to start off with, I'm just wondering, Nimi, what drew you to this topic of social media usage and millennials, and how we can integrate more mindfulness into this topic?
Yeah, I don't think that I would have been able to give you a very good. Uh, I don't think I would have been able to provide much depth to this conversation if I wasn't part of social media myself.
Mhm.
And that only happened in the past couple of years since the pandemic. And so for me, it has been a very recent phenomenon that I've gone into that world in a way where I'm experiencing these, whatever it is that I'm discussing today, I'm experiencing it firsthand. And so I would have probably been one of those people that stands on the outside and says it's bad for you or it's good for you or whatever it is that the opinion is. Today that I'm in it myself, I can tell you how it feels. The feeling of if I say it's not, certain things are not good for you, I can tell you how that feels, not just stats. So that's what drew me to this topic.
Since it's relatively recent in your life and
Yeah.
you're becoming more aware of how to use it in a more mindful way and kind of spreading that knowledge to others.
Yes, yes. And it didn't start off that way. I will say that as well. So I made my mistakes as well.
Okay.
And so that also helps a conversation because I know the other side of it. I can't just sit here and say, well, if you do this, this will happen. It's more like I didn't know if I do this, this will happen. And then it did. And then I learned. So I did learn it. But I did make the mistakes. And then it did cost me some some turmoil. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, me too. I didn't want to learn it that way, but it's okay. I guess that's a learning process.
Right, right. Do you feel comfortable going into that?
Yes, yes, I'd love to.
Obstacles that you faced, and maybe we
Yes,
can talk about the positive side of.
absolutely. Yes, yes. I think the biggest thing for me was I, at the age of 40, I started my own business. And so that business was, the service was me. I was the coach. And the best platforms out there were social media to put yourself out there, were social media. And so I, without thinking about or without doing any research or anything, I just dove into it and did whatever felt right. And I feel that was there's nothing wrong with that. You can go ahead and do that. Nobody has to go through rigorous research to be able to do all of this. But what I realized is that there were pitfalls that I could have avoided if I had maybe done a little bit more research, seen a bit more of the actual platform before I dove into it. And those pitfalls are what taught me and also that helped me maybe even enhance my coaching. So one of them was actually, this like comment game.
Right.
And I completely understand it. Instagram is the kind of, and I'm just going to talk about Instagram right now because that's where I faced it, but it's one of those platforms that expects you to work for them. You are working for them. So the more comments and likes you get, the more engagement you get, the more they will push your reel out. And also, or your reel or your whatever content you're putting out. And so you want that kind of engagement, because that means it's telling them that, because it's just a machine, it's only looking at numbers. So it is a numbers game. So to succeed on there, that it is a numbers game. But the problem with that is that, if you haven't healed certain parts of yourself, the validation that you receive from the 10 likes, as opposed to the 100 likes, as opposed to the 1,000 likes, every time you hit, let's say, a number that you haven't hit before, that dopamine hit, especially if you haven't healed certain parts of yourself, that validation that you receive, that dopamine hit, is so important for your body that it becomes a drug after a while. And you start craving more. And that's why these platforms are doing well, because they're relying also on this. And because there are so many people who are on there, you're also competing with these people. So you're not the only one that's putting out this kind of content. So now you want to better yourself, whatever that means. I mean, I'm putting that in air quotes because I don't even know what it means to better yourself. Because sometimes something that you put up that you didn't even expect to do well does, which took 5 seconds to make. And then sometimes you put 5 hours in a piece of content and it completely does not do well. And by not do well and do well, I mean by numbers only. And so you get attached to that stuff.
Mhm.
So you keep going up and down this valley, like you have these seesaw moments. You're literally on a seesaw going up and down,
Mhm.
in terms of, this is the dopamine and the acceptance and the rejection feeling that you receive just from the number itself, or from the people that are commenting.
Mhm.
And then you have the friendships, when you go start something like this. In the beginning, everyone's supporting you, all your friends are supporting you, and then suddenly you find a few of your friends who are not interested anymore, and that's fine, they're allowed to do that.
Mhm.
But you start taking it personally, then thinking, is it, why is my friend not liking my stuff? And so I think this is not something I faced, but then I saw it in other people, that they were going through this. And you also feel very, there's this weird feeling of this, the showing of your emotions and your affections in the internet rather than in real life. And so you become that. And so if you have someone who doesn't show you affection on there are people that can get affected by that. And they mistake that for being the reality of the person's affection for you. And so, say for example, you have 100 people following you, as opposed to 1,000 people, as opposed to 10,000. You feel like you're a celebrity, whereas when you step outside of the internet world, nobody knows who you are. And you've got like 5 friends who are, your loyal friends, who may not ever like your content because they're not on Instagram. So your
Right.
reality is so different in person than it is online, that you can get very confused in this like back and forth of like your online persona as opposed to your real life persona, if you are not a balanced person. And I mean mentally, and that's why the mindfulness comes in, is that if you are not mindful, and if your intentions are not clear
Mhm.
in what you actually want to receive from this experience,
Mhm.
you will get lost in the back and forth of this. So I saw a lot of this. If I experienced some of it, but some of it I saw in the people around me. And so it was quite scary to see sometimes, because people can get very affected by this. Your self-esteem takes big hits, up and down.
Right, right. And in many cases, we've seen like the rise of psychological disturbances because of social media usage and depression. There have been studies linking depression and social media usage. In some ways, it is slightly counterintuitive because what one would think would be the more quote unquote friends a person has, or the more followers a person has, in some ways, one might think that they might be happier, with such a community surrounding them. But unfortunately, it's in many ways, the data shows the opposite to be true, that these digital connections aren't necessarily nurturing us in the way that our human capacities need to be nurtured. And although it might give us a dopamine hit, as you described in the beginning, it's very superficial. There's nothing, it's not deep. It doesn't run through the core of who we are. So the connections that we make, while they might be a lot from a quantifiable perspective, they're very peripheral. They don't really enter into our emotional needs, into our larger growth as people overall. And that's why there have been links, research links between depression and social media usage. We have to be very aware of how much time we're spending, the connections we make, and in some ways the quality, because even online, the, there's a variation of quality, and who brings what to each interaction. It's not too different in terms of the various personalities people bring when they're in person. Bullying still exists. Things that are very negative and corrosive to a person are still out there. Toxic negativity, those things exist online, and in some ways, it's very difficult to shut off those digital outlets, because it, in some ways, it can seem like this illusion of being encapsulated by it, instead of in an in-person interaction where it people have a social interaction, and then they are allowed to leave the party or leave the room or whatever environment they're in online. It's very much tied to a person's social media account, and it's really hard to escape. I would like to bring up a point though, which is, for us, we both fit into that millennial category. And it means that many of us, I'd say, if I can say most of us, all of us, grew up in our younger years, elementary, I can say for sure, without social media. And so it gives us a unique perspective on social media and the integration of these different outlets in our lives, versus people who have been born with it. It becomes second nature in many ways to people who've grown up with social media. So in some ways, we have of um, a little bit of an outside perspective if we choose to use it, and if we choose to ground ourselves in that perspective, that we came to it later in life. And I'm just wondering if you see that as an advantage, or in some ways, a way to kind of plug in and help people discover mindfulness, as they're journeying about using social media, Is it something that maybe you could coach people on? And is that a way to maybe enter into this dialogue?
I actually, that's a brilliant way to put this. And your point is absolutely correct. And the
Mhm.
fact that I was talking to one of my friends, and I always say this about this topic, is that as a millennial, and I'm sure all other millennials will relate to this, is that I feel like I'm the bridge between the old school way of thinking, which is how I was brought up. You know, even our parents were very old school in how they brought us up. It was very traditional, in just like they did what their parents did, and so on and so forth. Nobody questioned, nobody had, you know, sort of like, we didn't think about mental abuse, and we didn't think about, you know, healing the generational, you know, wounds that we don't pass on to our children, and all of that. That didn't exist. There was no therapy that, I mean, there was therapy, but it's taboo in many cultures, including mine. So I couldn't even, I couldn't even mention to my parents that they go to therapy. That would be almost laughable to them. So I feel that we are the millennial generation are kind of the bridge between the old school way of thinking things and then the next generation, which is, as you said, they were born with this. They were born with all of this in their life, so they don't know any different. We do. We've seen both sides of the coin. And I feel like the disadvantage of this is when you're not mindful and you get carried away with the fact that we are, it's a midlife crisis for a lot of us. You know, we are in our a lot of us are in our late 30s, 40s as millennials in midlife crises. And the internet can be crazy for people who are in this situation, because you know, you're wanting more, you're wanting different, you're wanting to completely change your life. Well, guess what? Instagram can give that to you. It can give you all these ways to change yourself externally. I mean, not internally, of course, that's another process in itself. But externally, if you don't want to go deep down, then what it can do is it can provide these safe havens of, let's say, you know, continuously watching reels all day, you know, and doing nothing and wasting your time in and energy and brain power in something that is not actually serving you. It could be, you know, just as, let's say it's a millennial male who's watching all of these Instagram models, which you and I both know there are so many out there, in their 20s, and with perfect bodies. And then the millennial woman who's now in her 40s is watching these and she's thinking, oh God, this is what I want to look like, but I don't look like this anymore. And so I don't think that we had that kind of, we had, you know, magazines, movies, TV, and the people around us, but we didn't have the constant, like every time I pick up my phone, I'm going to see thousands of these, you know, images in front of me. And so I feel like that can also cause that damage. And so it's not actually serving you, but you're in this cycle of continuously running away from the work that you got to do on yourself, the healing that might actually serve you. You run away from that because it's so hard to do. We all know it's difficult to do that. And you run towards something like this, which can take you away from all of that. That is the disadvantage of a millennial who may be going through a midlife crisis, or is just a little older and doesn't feel so great about the things that they used to be able to do. And also the fact that we didn't get these chances, we didn't get these platforms. And so there's a little bit of that twinge of like, oh, I didn't get this before, but I have it now, you know? And so it can go down the sort of like the curiosity can take you down maybe the wrong tunnel, which is not serving you correctly, but then it's too late. You're now, you know, down that tunnel. And we all know what happens when you go down a rabbit hole. Just keep going. But
Right.
the advantage of that, like you were saying, in terms of coaching, is that if you are actually mindful of this, as a millennial, I have the beautiful perspective of having the time that none of this existed, and that my life was pretty quote unquote simple without the internet. And then this other life where all of this does exist. And I can use the platforms to say, hey, here are techniques that you could ground. Here are techniques to raise your vibration, raise your self-esteem. Not think of yourself as less than because of the way you look or the way you speak or the way you feel or anything. You can heal, and you are unique, and you can change that about yourself. So because when I was growing up, none of this existed, and that it didn't matter. So it actually does not matter. And so go out there and make real connections. That's what's going to serve you in the long term, instead of these these days, I heard one of the kids say this to me. They're like, I saw it on a quote as well, that the internet has the ability to, for two people to come close, have feelings for each other, and then just ignore each other.
Yes.
That
I
there is no makeup and breakup anymore. You just can ignore the person and ghost them, and you're done. You don't have that whole hey, I like you, I have feelings for you. You don't even have to say that anymore. You just continue talking, having this beautiful vibration, and then you stop talking, and that's it, the end. And then
Right.
move on with a heartbreak. So it's a very weird way of dealing with human emotions like heartbreak and falling in love and liking someone and all of that. It's a very technical way of dealing with these emotions that can be very triggering to human beings. So I feel that we have that opportunity as millennials to provide that, if, again, like you said, if we ground ourselves and if we are in that state of mindfulness in our daily life. And mindfulness is a practice. Don't think that you can do it once and then say, I'm done for the week. It's an everyday practice.
Right. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. And it shows so much compassion to our listeners who are, we're all still journeying and realizing that those who are watching this are journeying as well on this path of being more mindful and being more aware of who we are inside and our orientation in the present moment. And along those lines, I'm just wondering if you might have any advice for people who are struggling with being more mindful using social media. How are some ways that they can integrate mindfulness into this technical arena that we're in with social media?
That's something that I'm practicing on myself right now. So I would love to just tell you what I'm doing at this moment, which is I'm taking stock of what happened to me in the past year and how I may have maybe misjudged my own feelings and how I would feel and how I ended up feeling in this world of the internet and of Instagram. But I'm going to say that the one thing that I would like to go back in with is the fact that I have now a very clear intention of why I'm on there, why I look at certain videos and why I look at certain photos and why I follow certain people. There is an intentionality to what I'm doing online. And even if that's just sitting there and scrolling and watching just fun, I don't know, just vacation videos, I'm not saying everything has to be work related or mindfulness related or, productive, whatever that means. I just feel like if you're just watching fun vacation photos, make sure that your intentionality is very clear on why you are doing this. Why am I spending this 1 hour on here watching videos that are of beaches? Does it calm me down? Is that why I'm doing that? Oh, okay, cool. As long as I know. But if you have no idea, then I would say that find out. I would say just do a little bit of introspection, and that doesn't mean doing more, kind of deep work or whatever. Just ask yourself simple questions. Why am I doing this? What am I receiving from this? Because everything we do in life, we are receiving something from. Everything. So just ask yourself those questions, and I feel that that will suddenly ground you. And maybe you will say, oh, that question that I just answered is, I don't like the answer. I don't like that answer. It's not serving me. It's not helping me. And so I'd like to maybe stop watching this videos now, or this, content now. But if you want to continue, maybe even talk to a coach about it and say, I'm not getting any answers as to why I'm doing this, but I compulsively need to do this. Could you help me out? So I feel like that kind of introspection is very important for social media if you really want to be on there. That would be very helpful for the mind. But again, there's no judgment. I mean, people don't have to do what I'm saying. You can do what you like. This is
Right.
just a more healthier way of approaching something that does have pitfalls that you will not even realize will come up for you. And it's a very addictive platform, or platforms. They're very, very addictive. So anything that is addictive, any expert you ask outside of this realm will tell you, make sure that anything that is addictive you are very careful about.
Right, right, exactly. That's also been on my mind as well, the addictive nature of the social media platforms and how it's very tempting once one is engaged to keep continuing on to get more followers or more likes. It in some ways it's a game, and unfortunately, even though people might see that they're quote unquote winning the social media game by getting more approval from others, their inner dialogue and inner experience is not up to what one would hope would be, healthy and fully nourished. So I really appreciate you bringing up these topics because there's a tendency for us to jump in as a society, and only later do we think about the mental health and emotional health ramifications of our actions, when we really should be integrating these two components, the mindfulness and the social media, right from the get go together. How can we be more aware of what we're posting and what our intentions are, as you so eloquently said? Why are we there on social media, either posting or consuming? What is that doing for us? Is it lifting us up? Is it helping us to become better people, more aware of issues, more aware of the news, which can be positive or negative? What sort of news channels are we watching? Are we becoming more compassionate, more sensitive, creative, kind individuals? Or are we becoming um, kind of inwardly a bit deteriorated because we're so busy following one one dopamine hit after another that we have lost track of the overall picture, like we can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. And we really need to be asking ourselves these questions, as you said, which relates to the topic of being intentional about the usage, and being also very compassionate that if we do spend more time on it than we feel like maybe healthy for us, then just to kind of realize that and not judge ourselves because of that. And just realize that we're all on this journey together, because we all have areas of our lives that we're improving and working on. And we all are in this world as unfinished creatures. And just realizing that with a sense of compassion, I'm almost wondering if grounding practices while using social media might be helpful, such as taking breaks every so often. I've seen people do that, take breaks every number of minutes. They choose the number of minutes and then they take a few breaths and they go back to whatever they're working on. So maybe if one is fully entrenched within social media, to really make it a more structured practice of, well, for example, after 15 minutes, I will have my alarm go off and encourage myself to get up, be kind that it might not be easy to do so, but still be disciplined enough to get up and take a few mindful steps and breathe mindfully as one feels the their feet touch the earth. That sort of practice of really being aware of one's surroundings, being aware of one's steps, being aware of what's in the room. It sounds very simplistic and basic, but especially relating to the poem I read earlier, we need to be aware of our sensory experiences as we're engaging in life. And if we're cutting out a lot of that sensory experience, it really does interfere in some way with our capacity to fully engage with life in a more comprehensive manner. I feel like we're creatures that are we're meant to experience life in a comprehensive way, and if we're connected to our devices, it does unfortunately interfere with our ability to engage in life, to enjoy nature, to be out in the world. It's a double-edged sword. In some ways, as you mentioned, it works very well for people to connect and to discuss different topics, but then it also has some negative attributes like becoming addictive, even if people don't have that conscious awareness of drifting into that territory, or developing relationships that aren't necessarily nurturing, or in worst case, toxic relationships, or not being aware of the images they're putting up online and how that might affect their own psyche and their own inner being and overall wellness. I feel like it's very challenging in these times because we're still relatively new in terms of our ability to understand social media. These platforms, even though they've been around for a number of years, they're not really integrated so much into our societal consciousness as really things to moderate in a very structured way. We're all figuring it out on our own. And as you mentioned earlier, that the societal etiquette hasn't necessarily been established in terms of what one should expect from a social interaction online. And these are all areas that we need to really become more cognizant of and hold each other up and support each other as we're trying to figure out these sorts of issues in our society. It's really challenging when the same platform can be helpful, but it also can be in some ways negative to our own growth. And that fine balance between those two areas is in many ways a very tricky balance for many people to strike.
I agree with you. It's a very tricky balance. I mean, think about it this way, right? Isla, let's say that you're following, uh, I don't know, people, 20, beautiful looking people, let's say, okay? And this is, part of your following. These are your sort of, this is part of your friends list. And I say to you, Isla, why are you following 20 good looking people? What does that give you? And you say to me, I like looking at pretty people. And I say, okay, that's great. That's it, the end. So you can say whatever feels right for you. But the question is, are you telling the truth? Is it because you like to follow pretty people? Um, if you're going to ask a follow-up question to yourself, why does Ayla like following 20 pretty people? I'm just using 20. Sometimes people follow hundreds and thousands. And if I say, let's say I say put 1,000 out there. Why does Ayla like to follow 1,000 pretty people? That answer, that why, is just for you. It's not for me. You can give it to me because, I'm your friend and maybe you want to discuss it with me to see if I can help you. But you're the only person that can answer that and then find the mindfulness in how to, whatever answer you receive from that, as to how to proceed from there. Is it healthy for you or not? So I feel like when we just look at your friends list, that's one thing that you can do at any point in your social media life. Just look at your friends list and look at who you're following. What types of people are coming up for you? What types of accounts that are coming up for you? And ask yourself why. If you have an answer for that why that you don't like, see where that takes you. If you have an answer to something that you do appreciate the answer and you feel like it's a healthy answer, cool, keep going. So I feel like that in itself is a good practice to take you to where to do a little bit more mindful work in terms of social media. Because as you were saying, I mean, these screens are forcing you to stay glued to one sort of dimension. It's and we're in the 3D world and we're not experiencing the 3D. It's sad. It's like us not being able to experience the spirituality of our own beings because we're so busy in the everyday life of, I go to work, I come home, I eat, I go to sleep. The mindfulness that we create there, and joy and little things and in a cup of coffee and things like that. Well, that's what your phone is doing. It's taking you from the 3D world that you can experience all these sensory, beautiful sort of experiences, to a box, which I'm pretty sure we're not made for. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these amazing experiences when we do experience life. Otherwise, we would just be like, this is not fun. Going having a coffee with my friend was not fun. It's more fun talking to her online. But that's not true, is it?
Right. Like when we're actually having a coffee with a friend, we can smell the aroma of the coffee. We can hear people shuffling around the coffee store. We can hear the murmuring of voices as people talk.
Yeah.
And it becomes very enticing, like you're a part of the world. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a self-awareness practice to be online and be engaged with social media and
Yeah.
still have that self-awareness to realize that we're a part of this world, that we're not separate from it. And it almost feels like one is going against the grain when online, because it's an experience that you really have to bring that mental orientation to your platform, whatever platform you're on. You have to enter in with that way of thinking and way of being. And it's so easy to just get caught up in posting and clicking and sharing and all of these other wonderful things we do on these platforms. But then, if we're not careful, can turn into um, a bit of a slippery slope in terms of our own well-being.
There was an interview that I recently saw of a really, I can't remember her name. My apologies. I'm not very good with the names, but there was a supermodel a very long time ago, and she was beautiful, like the Audrey Hepburn type. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. It wasn't Marilyn Monroe though, but that category, basically that time, And an interviewer asked her, "Do you feel sexy?" And she's one of those women that were known for her sexy looks, and so that was her persona. And they said, "Do you feel like you are sexy?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And then they said, "Do you feel like you are beautiful?" And she said, "Well, you have to get to know me for you to tell me that I'm beautiful. because you have to get to know the way I move, the way I talk, the way I think, the way that's beauty. She said, beauty isn't this. I can just put on a great dress and you can be like, this person is nice looking and they're sexy,
Mhm.
but beauty is something more. And so I feel like that's what an interaction is. So if you tell me that, oh, but I'm on the internet because these people are so beautiful, but beauty isn't just your face. We all know that, otherwise people would not tell you that you are beautiful if they were only looking at our face, because a lot of us do not look like each other, so we can't all be beautiful. Is
Right.
there? So because we are all beautiful because we bring more than just our face, because there is a standard for beauty when it comes to face, and we don't all look like that. But there is someone in your life that feels that you are beautiful. Why do you think that is? It's not because of your face. That's not the only component that makes you beautiful. And so I feel like the beauty of life
Mhm.
is not found on face value, on something that only shows you um, something on a screen.
Right, right, exactly. I agree with you
Yeah. And,
completely.
and by the way, that includes places. Like we can look at someone who went to Paris and be like, oh, it must be so beautiful to be in Paris. Well, just walk outside your house. Trust me, it's beautiful to just go see a tree outside your house. That's beautiful. But we're unable to do that. And I feel like the day we do that is the day we are practicing mindfulness.
Right, right, exactly. I appreciate you bringing that up, that beauty isn't just this image or just this literal, in some ways, literal or figurative face value
Yeah.
that we're getting online, that it's very much of a holistic experience of a person. And what makes someone beautiful isn't their outer experience, their outer projection. It's who they are as people. And that also tends to be missed online, as well as an appreciation for our surroundings, immediate surroundings. So I appreciate you bringing that up. These are all very worthwhile topics to explore and to make sure that people are aware of when they're online. These are large topics, and I'm sure many people will need to take baby steps to ease their way into becoming more mindful and more aware of how they engage with social media. But the idea of a practice is, as we mentioned before, is to be compassionate and to be forgiving to ourselves and to keep moving along the path. It's not necessarily to go from start to finish in a short amount of time. It's to grow as a person and to be gentle along the journey. So I'm just wondering, we're about to wrap up. Is there anything you feel like mentioning that we might want to consider as a wonderful way to close this discussion?
I think in closing, first of all, I'd like to thank you for being so kind and having me on here. I'm truly grateful for being on your show, because these are important topics. Mindfulness for me is very important in my daily practice. So I feel that whenever somebody wants to talk about mindfulness, it makes me very happy, and because it's a great way to spread awareness through such platforms to so many people. And another thing I would like to say is that wherever you are in your life, however you're feeling right now, it's not permanent.
Mhm.
So I feel that that's very important for us to know, because that's why we use certain things, certain distractions. I feel social media is a distraction. A lot of other things are distractions to kind of not feel this way. Um, it's not permanent. So just know that what you're feeling today will change. Your feelings will change, your thought process will change. Just keep working on it. Feel what you're feeling. Even if it's painful, take baby steps towards it. If you use distractions, it's just going to build. So, and you don't want it to be permanent if it actually isn't, because it isn't. It isn't meant to be permanent. We just make it permanent because we're running from it because it's hard. So that's what I'd like to say to people out there. Anyone who's struggling with wherever you are in life, it's not permanent.
Wow. I feel like it's a gift that you've given all of us with your words today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, being bold, being courageous, and just sharing your perspectives on this issue in relation to our society, and being so gentle with our viewers in terms of ways they can help engage with social media in a more mindful way. Thank you. And just before we end, I would like to mention that if anyone is struggling with what they think she or they think could be an addiction, or any destructive feelings, please do reach out to a mental health professional, or if it's not on the level of a therapeutic interaction, reaching out to a coach, a life coach, or a wellness coach, who can offer some, practical suggestions with how to engage with social media in a more mindful way. But please do be gentle to yourselves and realize that seeking help, professional or otherwise, is an act of courage. It's an act of really stepping into who we are. And there's a lot of power in that. So please, I do encourage people to reach out if the situation calls for one to do so. And thank you so much for listening.